Ever feel like someone hit fast forward on the Adam and Eve story, like
Yeah.
right at the good part?
Yeah.
We know about the Garden of Eden, the forbidden fruit, but what happened after?
Right.
That's exactly what we're diving into today
Right.
with some help from the Urantia book. It takes this familiar tale in a fascinating direction, exploring their lives after leaving the Garden of Eden.
It really does. While other accounts often kind of end with their expulsion, the Urantia book details their journey as they establish a second garden in Mesopotamia.
Mesopotamia.
Yeah.
So not exactly a walk in the park like the first garden.
Not quite.
What did they face in this new environment?
Well, imagine going from a place of abundance to one where you have to work for every bit of sustenance.
Wow.
The Urantia book describes a harsher reality in the second garden, one where Adam and Eve had to adapt to natural disasters,
Oh, wow.
diseases,
Right.
and the inherent struggles of human existence.
A stark contrast to Eden.
Yeah.
I remember reading about nature being cursed.
Yeah.
How did that concept play out in their daily lives?
Well, it wasn't so much a literal curse,
Sure.
but more like nature following its natural course.
Okay.
In Eden, everything was essentially provided.
Right.
Now they had to learn to cultivate crops,
Yeah.
deal with unpredictable weather, and essentially face the realities of living off the land.
Talk about a crash course in survival. And of course, we can't forget about the whole Cain and Abel situation.
Right.
Most people remember the tragic end.
Yeah.
But something that stood out to me in the Urantia book was how Abel wasn't just a shepherd.
You're right to highlight that. The Urantia book points out that Abel was favored by the priests because he offered animal sacrifices,
Yep.
which was a point of contention with his brother Cain, a farmer.
That detail always puzzled me.
Yeah.
Especially since, back in the Garden of Eden, Adam wasn't exactly on board with animal sacrifices. So what prompted their resurgence?
It's a fascinating glimpse into the cultural climate of that time.
Okay.
See, pre-Adamic traditions, those that existed before Adam and Eve arrived, were deeply rooted in animal sacrifice.
Huh.
Despite Adam's attempts to introduce a new way of life, those older beliefs maintained a strong presence.
So even with Adam and Eve's influence, those deeply ingrained cultural practices found their way back into the mix. Makes you wonder about the power of tradition, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that establishing a new society is a monumental task.
Yeah.
Adam and Eve entrusted the religious and educational aspects of their community to Nodites,
Oh,
who had lived in the first garden and were familiar with those roles.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing that delegation inadvertently led to things reverting back to those pre-Adamic ways.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And this context is crucial for understanding the complexities of Cain and Abel's story.
Okay.
Cain, because of his lineage, was influenced by this cultural shift more acutely than his brother.
Interesting.
The Urantia book describes him as having a bellicose inheritance, which, coupled with his environment, created internal turmoil.
So while Abel, as you mentioned, had a more ideal environment
Right.
and this superb inheritance,
Yeah.
Cain faced a different set of challenges from the very beginning. It really makes you think about the nature versus nurture debate, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
The book seems to suggest that a positive upbringing can't completely erase inherited predispositions,
Right.
but a negative one can certainly hinder someone's potential.
Right.
It's a tragic example of how environment can impact even those with the greatest inherent advantages.
It's a reminder that both nature and nurture play a role in shaping who we become.
Yes.
Now, before we delve deeper into Adam and Eve's other children and their lasting legacy,
Okay.
let's take a moment to consider the implications of this cultural blending and the challenges faced by the first generation born outside of Eden.
It's a pivotal point in their story that often gets overshadowed by the more dramatic elements.
Huh.
By understanding the societal forces at play, we can gain a richer understanding of the choices made and the lasting impacts on humanity.
So we've seen how challenging life outside Eden was for Adam and Eve and their kids,
Right.
but they clearly didn't let that stop them from making their mark on the world.
They didn't.
What happened next?
You're absolutely right. Their story becomes one of resilience
Okay.
and far-reaching influence. While Cain went on to form his own community,
Right.
Adam and Eve had many other children
Yeah.
who contributed to their growing legacy.
Right. I'm thinking specifically of Adamson,
Yes.
their son,
Yeah.
who established another settlement of the violet race.
Right.
It seems they weren't content with just surviving.
Right.
They were determined to expand their lineage
Yeah.
and pass on their knowledge.
Exactly. Adam and Eve understood the importance of spreading their advanced lineage and wisdom.
Right.
They saw their mission as not just personal survival, but as uplifting the human race as a whole.
Their son Seth also played a key role, didn't he?
He did.
I read about the Sethite priesthood, which always seemed like more than just a religious institution.
It was indeed.
Okay.
The Sethite priesthood, established by Seth,
Yeah.
became a central pillar of their society, encompassing religion, healthcare,
Wow.
and education.
Really?
Imagine priests conducting ceremonies,
Okay.
serving as physicians and sanitation experts,
Wow.
teaching in schools. Talk about a holistic approach.
It's fascinating how intertwined those aspects were,
Right.
especially compared to how we often separate them today.
We do.
And speaking of doing things differently, I was amazed to learn that Adam and Eve were actually vegetarians.
Chuckles.
Not exactly the image that comes to mind when you think of the first humans.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
It's a detail that often surprises people.
Right.
The Urantia book makes a clear distinction.
Okay.
Adam and Eve were vegetarians, and it wasn't until later generations that meat eating became common practice.
It makes you wonder about the reasons behind that shift, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
But regardless of their diet,
Right.
what struck me was how advanced the Adamites were.
Yeah.
The Urantia book credits them with developing a written alphabet,
Right.
metalworking, pottery weaving, even sophisticated architecture for their time.
It's easy to forget that we're talking about a period long before recorded history as we know it. The Adamites were trailblazers.
Yeah.
They were driven by a desire to improve the world around them and leave a lasting legacy.
And they took concrete steps to preserve that legacy, didn't they?
I did.
I'm thinking of their efforts to ensure the continuation of their lineage.
Yes.
Which seemed incredibly forward-thinking.
Absolutely. Aware of their mortality.
Right.
Adam and Eve understood the importance of genetics.
Yeah.
The Urantia book describes a fascinating, albeit complex effort to share their advanced genes with humanity.
Wow.
Over 1,000 women from surrounding tribes were carefully selected to bear children carrying Adamic life plasm.
Wow.
Ensuring the continuation of their lineage and its influence on future generations.
It's incredible to think about the scale of that undertaking.
It is.
Over 1,000 families impacted by this effort to essentially upgrade the human genetic code.
Right.
It really makes you think about the far-reaching consequences of their actions.
Their story challenges us to think beyond the individual and consider the collective impact of our choices on future generations.
And just as they took steps to ensure the physical continuation of their lineage, they also grappled with the spiritual dimension of life and death.
They did.
The Urantia book introduces this concept of sleeping survivors.
It does.
Could you shed some light on what that means? Sleeping survivors is not a term you hear every day.
Yeah.
What exactly did the Adamites believe happened after death?
It's a fascinating concept. It speaks to their understanding of the afterlife, you know. Imagine a state of peaceful slumber after death, a time of rest and rejuvenation, as you await resurrection on the mansion worlds.
So they believed in reincarnation.
Well, not exactly reincarnation as some traditions view it. Think of it more like a spiritual waiting room.
Well, waiting room, okay.
Yeah, where you prepare for the next stage of your journey.
So even though they couldn't escape mortality, they held on to this belief in a continued existence beyond the physical realm.
Exactly. And it wasn't just a passive waiting period either. The Urantia book describes how they clung to a message promising the potential for resurrection upon the arrival of a paradise bestowal son.
That raises more questions than answers. What exactly is a paradise bestowal son? It sounds like a pivotal figure in their belief system.
Think of it as a divine being sent from paradise to bestow blessings and further the divine plan. The Urantia book goes into great detail about these sons and their roles.
Okay.
But for Adam and Eve, this message offered hope and a connection to the larger cosmic order.
Wow. It sounds like their faith played a huge role in how they faced their earthly challenges. But I'm curious, knowing their death was inevitable, how did their physical journey on Earth finally come to an end?
Despite their advanced lineage, Adam and Eve were still subject to the passage of time. Adam lived a remarkable 530 years before succumbing to old age.
Wow. 530 years.
Its Eve, unfortunately, experienced a heart condition.
Oh, no.
And died 19 years earlier.
530 years is still an incredible lifespan. It makes you wonder what stories they could tell, what they witnessed during their time on Earth.
Absolutely. And their final resting place is significant as well. They were buried together in the very center of the temple they had built.
The center of the temple. Why there? Was it simply a practical matter, or did it hold deeper significance?
It's believed that this practice, burying important figures in places of worship, actually originated with Adam and Eve.
Oh, wow.
Their tomb became a sacred site, a testament to their enduring influence on spirituality and culture.
That makes their story even more intriguing, connecting them to traditions that continue to this day. But this is where the Urantia book takes an unexpected turn. It suggests that death wasn't the end for Adam and Eve.
You're right. This is where their story takes on an almost mythical quality.
Okay.
The Urantia book states that Adam and Eve were resurrected just 3 days after their deaths.
3 days. That detail has echoes in other stories and traditions, doesn't it?
It certainly does. And according to the Urantia book, they then ascended to Jerusalem, their place of origin, not as returning residents, but as ascended citizens of the universe.
So from the Garden of Eden to exile to establishing a new society, and finally, resurrection and ascension. Their journey is full of twists and turns. It makes you think about the grand scope of their experience, doesn't it? We've only just scratched the surface of the Urantia book's account of Adam and Eve, but it's clear they weren't just passive figures in a garden. They were active participants in shaping the destiny of humanity, grappling with challenges that resonate even today.
Their story is a powerful reminder that we're all part of something much larger than ourselves.
Right.
And even amidst the turmoil of life, there's always hope for progress and continued evolution, both individually and as a species.
Their journey challenges us to consider the impact of our own choices and the legacy we leave behind. It's a fascinating story, full of adventure, hardship, and ultimately, hope. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.